Time is 5:30. Welcome to the Tompkins County Legislature. If you'll please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could have a roll call of members, please.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar. Lee Shirtliff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Travis Brooks.
Here.
Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion.
Here.
Susan Curry.
Here.
Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Rich John.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Here.
Veronica Pillar.
Promoting her to panelist now.
Here.
Shauna Black.
Here.
14 members present.
Thank you. This evening, we have a presentation for a proclamation for Juneteenth. And I would like to welcome to accept the proclamation this evening, Siobhan Bunch, who is the Executive Director of Southside Community Center, and Kayla Matos. And our friends from the Southside Community Center, we thank you for joining us this evening. And we will start the proclamation. Whereas slavery came to North America in 1619 with the delivery of the first enslaved Africans to a colony in Virginia, and although President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st, 1863, more than 2 years passed before news of the liberation of slaves came to Texas, and African Americans across the state were made aware of their right to freedom on June 19, 1865, the day that it was officially recognized as the Juneteenth holiday. And whereas Juneteenth, as this day came to be known, commemorates the hardships and losses suffered by African Americans in their struggle to attain freedom from slavery, to recognize and pay tribute to the memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice in this quest, and herald their experiences of those and others who were successful in achieving victory. And whereas Tompkins County's history counts among its numerous sons who enlisted to fight in the Civil War, 26 African-American residents who signed up between December 1863 to February 1864 at St. James AME Zion Church, Ithaca's oldest church structure and among the nation's first AME Zion churches. And whereas the civil rights movement of the 1960s, better described as multiplicity of movements, addressed the racial segregation, discrimination, and acts of violence committed against blacks in the United States, and ultimately sought to secure legal recognition and federal protection of the rights of citizenship for African Americans as guaranteed by the Constitution. And whereas African Americans have changed the face of education in the United States by protecting access and opportunity, insisting on the inclusion of all histories, and guaranteeing the rights to education for all youth. And whereas Juneteenth reminds us that decades of collective action have demonstrated measurable progress, albeit slowly, frustratingly, and gradually, while persistent inequity and injustice for African Americans continue in education, employment, socioeconomic mobility, healthcare access, and public safety on our nation's journey toward a more perfect union. And whereas the observance of Juneteenth honors the history, perseverance, and achievements of African Americans and celebrates Americans' progress and continuing commitment to realizing the principles of liberty and equality upon which our nation was founded. And whereas Juneteenth is recognized as a holiday or observance in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, with the state of New York first recognizing Juneteenth in 2004 and officially became a federal holiday June 17, 2021. And whereas the Tompkins County Legislature adopted Juneteenth as a paid holiday for all employees on April 19, 2022, to be observed Monday, June 19, 2023, throughout the county, and whereas this year Tompkins County and City of Ithaca leaders came together on behalf of their workforces to develop a day of programming on June 16th, 2023, telling the story of Juneteenth by recognizing the past and honoring our future through presentations, Black-owned business exploration, and a community meal. And whereas the Southside Community Center hosted the county city events and continued the celebration and recognition through the weekend with a community block party and other events, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Tompkins County Legislature proclaims, recognizes, and designates June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth, and further honors and celebrates throughout Tompkins County the rich history of African Americans who fought, died, strived, and thrived in the pursuit of freedom. In witness thereof, I, Shauna Black, have hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the Great Seal of Tompkins County, State of New York, on this 20th day of June 2023.
Can we have one of our little ones too? Oh.
I am honored to accept this Juneteenth proclamation on behalf of Southside Community Center, the historically Black Southside neighborhood, the city of Ithaca in Tompkins County.
Thank you all to our guests. It was really special to have you this evening. And you're welcome back anytime. Okay, next we will not have an executive session this evening. And it is time for privilege of the floor. We have one speaker, and I just want to read the rules for speaking real quick. I agree to a 3-minute time limit. I agree not to raise my voice. I agree not to use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language, or speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. I agree not to speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about the job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. After 3 minutes, I agree to leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. I agree that if I cause a disruption and am asked to leave, I will leave the chambers. And our first speaker this evening is Zach Wynn.
Good evening. My name is Zach Wynn. I live here in the city, and I'd like to make the legislature aware of a stabbing that occurred in the jungle encampments behind Warehouse Carpet Outlet early on the morning of June the 19th. A man was critically injured, and thanks to the timely arrival of law enforcement who applied a tourniquet, the man luckily survived. A dog was also stabbed during this incident. This area behind Warehouse Carpet Outlet is essentially a lawless place and is the site of ongoing fires, overdoses, theft, and other criminal activity. This portion of land is both city and railroad property, with Ithaca Central Railroad and Norfolk Southern both claiming the other owns the property. The city planned to address unsanctioned encampments set to be discussed at this week's PEDC meeting, outlines a plan to designate city land near Brindley and Cecil Malone Drive a high priority for enforcement. This red zone includes a portion of land surrounded by railroad property behind Warehouse Carpet Outlet. Neither the county continuity of care document or the proposed city policy call for an immediate addressing of these encampments. County personnel are being drawn into these areas on a regular basis. The city plan also includes a 66-acre sanctioned encampment in a green zone behind Walmart. I would like to again ask the legislature to consider taking the issue of unsanctioned encampments out of the city's hands and address it as the county-wide issue that it is. These issues demand an immediate and decisive action. People are getting injured and dying of overdoses, less than a 5-minute walk from Wegmans. So I encourage you all to examine these issues and consider acting very swiftly. So I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no other speakers this evening for privilege of the floor. Next, let's move on to municipal officials. Jorge from the City of Ithaca is here. Welcome, Jorge.
Hey, folks. I'm going to pull up my notes, but before I do want to draw attention to the big thing in the room, which is that we have a very important election going on right now. It's perhaps the most important election in Tompkins County's history, so I encourage all of you to go vote in the I Voted sticker contest and pick which sticker you want to represent for upcoming elections. I have my personal preferences. I don't want to throw that onto any of you guys, though, so go vote. That being said, tomorrow is City Council's PEDC. We will be discussing the draft policy there. There will be a presentation, is my understanding, by city staff on it, followed by discussion. So that's what we can expect out of PEDC tomorrow. After that, later on this month, we do have our city administration meeting where a number of policies will be discussed as well. I'm personally bringing a discussion item for the City of Ithaca to consider adopting a resolution and an ordinance to identify the city as a sanctuary for transgender and gender nonconforming folks who might be coming to the city seeking gender-affirming care or therapy and not having to worry about being persecuted if they're coming from states or municipalities that have adopted more aggressive policies pertaining to the challenges that they're dealing with as folks who are not cis or het. Further, we also have been continuing our city manager discussion. That happened at our previous common council meeting where we heard presentations from our consultant as well as from other members of city staff who've been working on this tirelessly, and we hope to provide further updates at future meetings on how the city of Ithaca is going to be deciding allocations of responsibilities and rollout of job descriptions and what have you. But so far, I think our last meeting was a very productive one, and I'm very excited to see as we are moving forward a model not too dissimilar from the model that you all have in the near future. Also happening at our next city administration meeting is a continued discussion over firearm safety legislation requiring that registered gun owners keep their firearms in a registration box or some type of lock box in their homes to avoid accidents on unnecessary injury. So that's going to continue. That discussion item, which was brought originally at the previous city administration meeting, will continue going forward. And then in all seriousness, we do have early voting underway right now for our common council elections. I encourage folks to go participate for the Democratic primary and then following later on this year in the general in November. So those are the entirety of my updates. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jorge. I also thank you for mentioning the I Voted sticker contest. And although I'm not a cat person, I have to say the cat one was really cool. Are there any questions or comments for Jorge? Dan Klein?
I'll do one. Jorge, you mentioned that, I can't turn around and look at you because of the microphone.
It's all good.
You mentioned that the form of government that the city's moving towards is pretty similar to what we do here at the county. Mm-hmm. And the last time I checked in and heard about this, there was one big difference that I heard about. I'm wondering if you have any comments about it, which is that in the county, the city attorney reports directly to the legislature, and in the proposal that I had heard from the city, the city attorney would be reporting to the city manager. So if you don't, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I believe that that's as things are operating right now as I understand them, but I do believe that we will be having multiple conversations in the future regarding job description and how some of those things that have typically been with the executive of the mayor will move over to city manager. And I don't have anything concrete to say about that per se. I think I can see valid points about wanting to move to a model similar to the council on a personal level of having the city attorney report to legislature as opposed to the city manager, but I can also hear, the alternative opinion to that in terms of how other municipalities have done it in the past, as we heard from a presentation from our consultant at the previous Common Council meeting earlier this month. I think that's probably one of the things that we're hoping to hash out in the future soon. So I'm looking forward to hopefully providing a more concrete update on that at the following one of these meetings.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jorge and the city of Ithaca? Rich John?
Thank you, and thanks for coming, Jorge. On privilege of the floor, we just had a guest talking about the area behind warehouse carpet and the incidents there and the city policy that has been talked about for some period of time. Do you have a timeline when you think that might get to Common Council for decision?
Mm-hmm. So as of right now, it is slated as a discussion item for tomorrow with a presentation, which to me means that my understanding is that at the subsequent July PEDC meeting, barring any issues or what have you, it will be a voting item for committee, moving to Common Council in, I believe, August for a vote. That's if, procedurally speaking, that's if nothing has to return to working groups or committees for further revisions and things of that regard.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much, Jorge.
No problem.
We appreciate you coming.
Have a good one, y'all.
Okay, next we have Rod Howe from the town of Ithaca. Hello, Rod.
Hey, the lighting is always poor in my house, sorry. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person. So I just have a few updates. There's nothing earth-shattering. It's just a chance to stay visible, the town of Ithaca to stay visible and present. Obviously, most of you probably have to go through the town of Ithaca to get to lots of places. So we know you think about us a lot. So a few updates. By the way, we are very pleased to be one of the locations of early voting. I'm so glad that our lobby is used for that purpose. Safe Streets for All. Many of the municipalities in Tompkins County are part of this initiative to take a chance to look at where are there issues from either a pedestrian, a bicycling, reducing speed perspective. So we are very much part of that. And we are getting increased requests all the time for sidewalks, bike lanes, speed reduction. So this is a good way of pulling together a lot of information and then figuring out what grants we might be able to go after. From a Green New Deal perspective, I've already mentioned we have this wonderful historic building, but it's not the most energy efficient building. So we've initiated a weatherization study. Obviously, there's some big ticket items that will need to be addressed for us to button up the building to be more energy efficient and to be net zero. So we are embarking on that process. Some of you may have heard someone from the city or someone from the town talk about community choice aggregation. It continues to move forward slowly. This is the ability to buy energy in bulk on behalf of the municipal residents and businesses. So the materials should be submitted to the Public Service Center. It's got to go through City Council. It's got to go through Town Board. I'm hoping everything will be submitted by the end of the summer. We now have a new name because community choice aggregation doesn't really mean a lot. So look for TGen, which is Tompkins Green Energy Network. We have a logo, we have a tagline. So we will be rolling out an education and outreach plan over the summer. We are expecting other municipalities to, down the road, join on to TGen. We are starting to work on our GEIS, the components of our generic environmental impact statement, as we move forward on our traditional neighborhood development on South Hill. So it will take a while to decide what firm we're going to work with for GEIS and to have that roll out, but it's a step in that traditional neighborhood development on South Hill. Of course, like everyone else, we're starting to work on our 2024 budget very early on, just still getting information from each of our departments. We have a new telecommunications law that took a couple of years. We also have a revised solar law. We're expanding the amount of acreage that solar could occupy in the town, so we're excited about that. We're always thinking about trail extensions and how to extend trails and connections with other trails. We're always looking at how to how to enhance our preserves. So that's ongoing. We're working with TCOG on energy infrastructure. You know, we all know as we continue to electrify that our infrastructure is not quite there. So we're working closely. Terry Carroll has been very involved in that committee. We've asked for input from each of the municipalities to get a better handle on how soon might some of these electrification initiatives happen so that we can have deeper dialogue with utility companies. Let's see, I think that's it. I really wanted to just bring the town of Ithaca to you in a snapshot. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any questions.
Thank you, Rod. Are there any questions for Rod Howell from the town of Ithaca? Dan Klein.
Rod, the South Hill neighborhood you talked about doing the GEIS for, is that the area at the intersection of King Road and 96B?
Correct, where, you know, the idea is that down the road, it will take some time. It would be kind of a village with housing, small businesses, so really a compact small neighborhood with lots of amenities. But, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. So we're starting with the GEIS.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rod this evening? Okay. Thank you, Rod, for attending.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, moving along, it is time for legislators and privilege of the floor. Mike Lane.
249 years ago, Daniel D. Tompkins was born, I believe on Staten Island, and tomorrow is his birthday, June 21st. He was born in 1774. Next year will be the big one, 250. But our county's named for him. He was a wonderful governor. He probably saved us from being part of Canada during the War of 1812. And he later became vice president. But we remember him because of the things, because of his service, particularly as governor of New York, including his efforts to officially end slavery in the state of New York, which took 10 years after he signed it, but it finally happened. So, happy birthday, Dan.
Not Dan Klein.
That's next week.
Veronica Pillar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note that today, June 20th, is World Refugee Day, according to the United Nations. And of course, we've talked about Tompkins County being welcoming to refugees recently, but on this day, I think it's worth to reaffirm that we do here enthusiastically welcome immigrants and refugees. We recognize a lot of the people who come here or might come here are also fleeing violence exacerbated by actions of our own country, not perhaps the county, and the connectedness of our global community. And I am really grateful for the strong community of organizations here we have that do work welcoming and reaching out to refugees, as we see all the time and recently in the meetings that our leadership have convened to prepare for possible folks coming here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Veronica. Anyone else? Lee Shurtleff.
Just want to tell you about what I consider an exciting village board meeting I attended last night in the village of Groton. They voted to go to bond for up to $4.2 million to move forward with a public safety municipal office complex on the Main Street. And this has been a project we've been trying to get off the ground since I was first fire chief in 1991 when we established a capital reserve fund. And very excited about it. It's been out to bid twice. The costs were prohibited the first time it went through, but the village has re-looked at it, resized it, and it is looking forward to a project that would allow us to house the emergency services, which are now a 24-hour-a-day career staffed, in addition to volunteers, unit. And so we're excited about that. And hopefully will also lead to further investments into our downtown areas. But for those of you that wonder about my dragging my feet on government building projects, I just point out that sometimes we work on these things for 30 years before they come to fruition. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next is Randy Brown.
Yes, thank you. Last week I went and attended an open house helped arranged by the Chamber of Commerce for the Stratton Creek Inn in Newfield. It's a 100-year-old home that has been remodeled and back to its original condition, as well as a very unique barn that's over 100 years old that's been completely remodeled. And they get weddings there and those types of things. But it was purchased by 3 different families in the Newfield, Trumansburg area, and there's 4 rooms. They serve breakfast. It's really a beautiful home with nice grounds. If anybody remembers Janet Mara, if anybody remembers that, was her home originally many years ago. I attended the Enfield Town Board meeting, and they've been discussing their fire department emergency rescue, and they decided and voted unanimously to change from a fire department to a fire district. And what that means is they become their own municipality, so to speak, their own taxing authority. And the reason they did is because they realized that the people that have been running the fire department for some of them over 50 years are getting up in age, and they need fire commissioners. So they'll appoint fire commissioners, and they'll manage the money and the structure and the training and all those things are required. And then they'll let the firemen be firemen to do that type of work. They seem to be doing fairly well bringing younger people to address safety issues and fires and accidents, but nobody really wants to run the place. So that's why they went with fire districts, and I think it was a good move by them. So.
Thank you, Randy. Anyone else? Any other legislators? Okay. I am going to move on to a quick chair's report. I just want to send out congratulations to our high school seniors. My daughter walks across the stage tomorrow, assuming that she passed her finals. And they're going to have 2 sessions tomorrow at Ithaca High School, one around noontime and then one in the afternoon. So that area might be a little bit congested with so many parents and family attending. I would also like to congratulate the non-local team of the Las Vegas Golden Knights who won the Stanley Cup this year. I was pretty excited about that in our family. And just a reminder for legislators, we are not going to have our first meeting in July. We will have the 3rd meeting on the 3rd Tuesday, and Dan Klein will be your chair for that evening. So any requests, make sure to send him his way. And I do have a few chairs appointments this evening. Workforce Development Board, and all of these appointments will expire June 30th, 2026. Todd Brewer, 20% required labor organization representative. Stephen Waite, business representative. Jeffrey Madison, mandated partner, adult education literary representative. Kate Shanks Booth, 20% required youth serving organization representative. Kevin Kersey, business representative. Jennifer Tavares, business representative. And Paul Levesky II, business representative. And next on our agenda, we do not have any special topical presentations.
Isn't there another?
That's going to be on the consent agenda.
That's on the consent agenda.
The EMC, yeah. We do not have any special topical presentations this evening. Let's see if we can hear a report from County Administrator Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few brief updates from County Administration. As you know, after an RFP process, County Administration selected a grant services consultant, and that firm is 11th House Solutions. And they've begun a process of outreach and one-on-one meetings with department heads to assess their current funding priorities and capacity to apply for and administer grant funding. And 11th House has also made their grant writing services available to any department who's currently in the middle of writing a grant or facing a grant deadline. In the area of strategic planning, Barry Dunn, the county strategic operations plan consultant, will begin initial outreach to legislators. Perhaps they've contacted you already, but they'll be reaching out to legislators and community partners over the next couple of weeks to schedule individual and group interviews throughout the summer months for the first stage of the strategic planning efforts, and community input sessions and focus groups are slated to occur in September. And then finally, the Weights and Measures Director position is now posted in addition to the list of the other management level positions for which we're now searching. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Lisa Holmes? Okay, thank you. Bill Troy, County Attorney.
I have nothing of merit to speak to today.
Okay. Any questions for Bill Troy? Okay. Next, Director of Finance, Lori Scarrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple quick updates. I'm happy to say that we got the March and April sales tax distribution out. Checks should have been printed today. And May will go out next Tuesday. So we're caught up as far as we can get on the sales tax, with the exception of I have not put together the quarterly reports yet, but the distributions are out. Also, the auction has been rescheduled for June 29th, which is next Thursday, up at Public Health again. The audit, we're still continuing to work with our auditors on site. They were here on site for solid 2 weeks, the past 2 weeks. This week they're here 2 days, and next week they will be here 2 days. And hopefully that will do it for them. And they can wrap up and we can get something to you. This week we also have been working on gathering continuing disclosure documents, which is required for our bonds. We have to file, that's a required state filing for our bonds. So we've been working on getting that information together and to fiscal advisors for that filing. And last but not least, today we had our kickoff meeting with Vanesky's group for the county's cost allocation and space plans, which are required for DSS and mental health claiming. Any questions?
Ann Corman.
Thank you for the report, Lori, and thanks again, I said by email, but thank you for expediting the sales tax reimbursements or the monies to the municipalities. So I know that was several weeks faster than you thought you could do it, so thank you.
You're welcome, and I shout out to the staff in the finance department because they worked really hard to get that done.
Yes, please thank them.
Mm-hmm.
Our village clerk is very grateful as well. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mike Lane?
Don't know whether this is really a question for Lori or whether it's for Bill, but understand that the state legislature is still looking at a moratorium on the in-rem foreclosure proceedings. And is that going to affect us if we go ahead with our sale?
No, I was concerned about that at first, and that's why we adjourned what had been the original date. But I'm satisfied, given what finally came out of the assembly, and that's gone to the governor's desk, that we can do this. We'll get the sale done on the 29th of June. That money goes into an account. We're not going to take anything other than what we truly are owed for having put money in for the deficiencies. And then we'll have to see a year from now what happens next. So we were allowed to do this up until July 1.
Okay, so the moratorium wouldn't go into effect until July 1.
Correct. And we just didn't want to let that linger.
I understand. Thank you.
Please, that works.
But any surplus would be escrowed.
Absolutely.
Right.
The only thing we won't, everything, even if we feel we're owed interest, we're going to put it in. We've been advised that's the way to do it, and we'll sort it all out when the court gets to it.
Greg Mezzi and then Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, so just to be clear, any tax that's already been paid out or distributed to, like the school or the city or town, will be taken out of that? Is it?
Yes, if it's come out of that tax money, yes, we're allowed to take that out. We can also take interest on it, but we're being advised, don't do it. Just leave it there for a judge to look at, and we'll get it back.
Got it. So we're just taking whatever the original tax delinquency is, that's what we're taking out. Everything
Correct.
else is escrowed.
Correct.
Deborah Dawson.
Thank you. My understanding of this moratorium is that the purpose of it is to allow Albany to work with various stakeholders and come up with a solution to this problem. Are we a stakeholder that might participate in that?
We certainly should listen and see what they're doing, if only for defensive purposes, to see them stopping doing something that we don't think is appropriate. But this seems to be working. But we're in uncharted waters. I will freely admit that.
No, but I mean, as they go through this process for the next year, I would hope that there is some mechanism through which we can express our opinions as to how this should be.
Yes.
I think, too, NISAC is playing an active role on behalf of counties, and we can submit our feedback through NISAC.
Is there a statewide association of finance directors or that?
It's also through NISAC.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Lori? Okay, thank you. Are there any resolutions to be added or withdrawn from this evening? Okay, we're not going to remove that one. Okay, gotcha. Consent agenda, resolutions and appointments to be voted on as a group unless any member of the legislature requests that a resolution or appointment be instead included separately and individually as part of the business of standing or special committees. Advisory board appointments, ID 11723. Environmental Management Council, Peter Pennyman. Town of Enfield representative.
Now, may I interject just to say, it's nice to see Peter Penniman back at the county as a member of an advisory board. Peter served as a legislator here. He was distinguished legislator, and I was proud to have served with him.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, on to Resolution A, Reimagining Public Safety Committee, Healing Mosaic Mural, ID 11731. Resolution B, Audit of Final Payment, Baseline King Corporation, Rehabilitate Taxiway Lighting, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID 11704. Resolution C, Authorizing Acceptance of a Federal Aviation Administration Grant to Rehabilitate Terminal Apron, Design, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID 11715. Resolution D, authorizing 2023-5 Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 Urban Formula Program Grant Application for Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit, TCAT, ID 11735. Resolution E.
Resolution E should be pulled because it was amended at committee.
Okay, we're going to pull that. Resolution F, authorizing 2023-7 Federal Transit Administration 2021 Section 5307 Urban Formula Program Grant Application for Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit, TCAT, and Tompkins County, ID 11738. Resolution G, Contract Extension Cleaning Service, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID 11748, Government Operations Committee. Resolution H, Authorization to accept a grant from the New York State Archives, County Clerk, ID 11702. Resolution I, Authorization to direct the County Administrator to sign a pilot agreement with NSF Danby, LLC, ID 11712, Public Safety Committee. Resolution J, authorization to accept the Department of Justice Controlled Equipment Funding, Sheriff's Office, ID 11718. Resolution K, reappropriation of pretrial grant for benefit of the pretrial program of Tompkins County, ID 11719. Housing and Economic Development Committee, Resolution L, authorization to disperse county funds to the Community Housing Development Fund for Habitat for Humanity, South Plain Street and Dart Drive Scatter Site Project, and for Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, Trumansburg for Cell Townhomes Phase 2, ID 11714. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Greg Muzzy, seconded by Deborah Dawson, and we're going to do a roll call.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
14 ayes. Consent agenda passes.
Thank you. Now on to the standing and special committees. Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
Thank you. We met on June 15th and talked about a lot of things, including what I consider a first-class report that we received from our county administration, and I know it was a group that worked on that. We have talked about the downtown facilities, quote-unquote, plan for a long time. But we kept coming around that we really didn't have a plan. And it makes a difference now that we're getting into the idea of possibly deconstructing buildings and the idea of possibly doing a center of government. And I want to thank Lisa particularly for leading this effort we delayed a month to get it, but it's worth it. I think it's been sent out to the full legislature at this point, hasn't it, Lisa? So you may have had a chance to look at it. What I liked about it personally was the fact that it gave us choices. It didn't say you must do this, you must build, or maybe you can't build and we can just use other buildings and lease. It gives us choices. So it's something we're going to take up in further discussion at our next meeting, but I just wanted to point that out as probably the highlight of our meeting. The Red House still stands, by the way. It's important to note that we've also had movement on the issue of the CDL testing site for potential driver's licenses for those who may want to drive large vehicles and buses. We've been looking for a number of years at using a site at the airport, and we've been trying to get a grant to do that. This, most recently, we were on the list with Department of Motor Vehicles, but they failed to get funding for that. I want to thank administration again, particularly Norma Jane, who has been working on this. They started looking again with fresh eyes and said, well, what if we found another site? Knowing that we had looked all around the county with our county clerk a number of years ago to try to find a site that nothing seemed to work out, they said, well, what about TC3 parking lots? And actually, we had discussed that years ago, and TC3 had said no. But apparently, new administration at TC3, they've got some ideas that maybe they can work with us. So that may allow us to have a site that we can use. It isn't very close to downtown Ithaca. It's in Dryden, of course. But it's closer than Syracuse or Binghamton or Auburn, so that people could get their training and testing for their licenses more closely. At ITCTC today, there was a report from Ithaca Bike Share about the white bikes that you see around town here in the downtown. There are 80 of them presently, and they are mostly used in College Town right now. There is a possible grant opportunity from NYSERDA that Ithaca Bike Share might get 160 more of these bikes. These are electric pedal-assisted bicycles, and they're heavy, but they do have the motors in them. So something to be thinking about and something that people are using again, different than the Lime bikes that we had in the past. I would just also mention, finally, that Roxanne Noble told us that September 17th was going to be Airport Day. And so you might want to put that on your calendars. That usually starts out with a breakfast at the East Hill Ithaca Flying Club, and usually has lots of fun displays and activities that go on. So that's September 17th. Randy, anything else? And I'll take questions, and then I do have an amended resolution that was Resolution E was withdrawn.
Okay, any questions for Mike? Okay.
All right, I'm going to move the amended version of Resolution E, which is in your red folder, authorizing 2023-6 Federal Transit Administration FTA Section 5307 Urban Formula Program Grant Application for Tompkins County. If I get a second, I'll tell you what changed.
Seconded by Deborah Dawson.
We've added, if you can see in yellow, the gadabout funding, which frankly had just been overlooked in the first version. So that's the change.
Rich John?
I did have a question on this resolution. It shows project administration on the federal level that seems disproportionate to the total grant amount. And I was wondering if there was an explanation for that.
Well, Dwight's here. Maybe he can try to answer your question.
With a total grant amount of $1,991,757,000 is in project administration? That just seemed odd.
Hi.
Hi.
This is covering the 2021 through 2024 period. And so we are reserving the funding for 2024 on the presumption that the additional staff will be hired in time to make use of it. And if that does not work that way, then the money can roll over and help pay for 2025. So this is a reservation of the federal funding, and it was one thing that I really considered, that I wanted to provide a secure source of federal funding for at least 2024, and if it applies, into 2025, because we don't know what Congress is going to do. And so rather than be vulnerable as we deal with a future budget, just look at this opportunity to reserve some of that funding now. It seemed to be a very core county priority and importance.
Thanks for that. I guess I'm just still confused. So you're saying the federal component, the federal project administration, we're reserving out of our grant funds to pay for future years? And so if we get grants in future years, we won't pay for federal grant administration or project administration?
What I hope is that when there's a allocation by Congress, that we take this forward so that we're reserving funding for the next year for the core purpose of administrative funding. Now, why? Because I've been around long enough where the most dysfunctional thing that I remember was when Congress made 3 appropriation efforts. We didn't have the final appropriation until either late April or May of one year. This could have been 10 years ago, but stuff happens. And so when that happens, we cannot be applying for money for partial years of partial allocations that occur. We have to wait until the final appropriation is made. And since the transportation planning unit will have 3 people instead of 1, it just seemed to be very prudent to look ahead and say, okay, let's reserve the money now. And so we will be able to make use of the funding. You're welcome.
Ann Corman.
Thanks for that explanation. Dwight, has that been done in previous years? Like, is there a history of this?
Absolutely not. It didn't dawn on me to do it until recently with my shorter time period as an employee coming. I was just thinking ahead and say, do you know what? This is an opportunity to go and do this.
Am I the only one that is like super confused about what's going on here?
No, you're not.
Okay.
Deborah? Follow up. So I'm trying to understand, is there like a limit on how much we're allowed to retain of these grants for administration? Sort of like the limits that we put on the hotel tax that we retain for administrative costs, or can we just use this however we want to?
Well, we have this project type is defined, and the use of the money has to be within that definition. In terms of the amount, it is the county sits down and talks with TCAT and talks with Gadabout, and this has been the pattern over 40, well, not quite 40 years, since 92, that the county puts forward what the allocation is for TCAT, and TCAT has an allocation in their grants, which is very large, like $7 million. So this is the first time that the county is creating a unit to do a lot of detailed work to make sure that our sub-recipients, primarily TCAT, but also Gadabout, and also the county in our work, that we follow and comply with all of the federal regs, and that is now including, since our federal review is in its completion time, it's being wrapped up now, there's a lot more work that the county staff has to do. And rather than running, I wanted to lower the risk going when we prepare budgets for the next year, that we have the federal funds are accessible to us now. And we don't have to wait for any potential machinations at the federal level regarding how money gets appropriated at the federal level and when that appropriation process is completed, because it can go all over the place. So, and mainly being the federal budget gets chopped up and it gets delayed. And that means we cannot apply for the grant at that time. We have to wait till the process is over And the grant process is about 90 days to 120 days. So you end up being at the end of the year before you can draw down any money down, dealing with the expenses that you've incurred for the entire year. With this approach, we're able to have that money in hand at the beginning of the year, so the county can, as it incurs the expense for the administration, access the funding.
I remain confused to some extent, because my understanding of the section 5307 and 5311 monies is that they're formula grants. But beyond that, I'm a little concerned about this large appropriation to county use, because I attended a TCAT budget committee meeting today and learned that Gadabout is losing $8 on every passenger it carries. Gadabout is something that we're required, we being TCAT, are required to provide that service. We have a contract with Gadabout that we support them, and they're asking that that $8 per passenger be supplied by TCAT beginning January 1st, which is about a 30% increase in what TCAT's going to have to pay. Would seem to me that maybe some of this money ought to go to Gadabout rather than to the county.
I would like to have Frank Dodo come up, please.
I was going to say, you've confused me, Deb, on this.
My work here is done.
How many people are still confused? Okay, let me try to break it down for you, see if this makes sense. So Tompkins County every year gets an appropriation from the Federal Transit Administration through the formula that you all are talking about. So that approximation, don't quote me on this exact number, but the appropriation is approximately $4.1 million per year, okay, based on the formula. So from that $4.1 million, the task for the county liaison, meaning Dwight, me, is to figure out how that money is going to be allocated fairly and equitably, okay? So the one thing we have to look at is, let's get the foundation strong. And what is our foundation strength? It's our county representatives using their tools to ensure that everybody's in federal compliance, so that when we get reviews, we're in compliance, number one. Number two, it's our transit agencies, TCAT, Gadabout. We got to make sure they're financially stable, because if the wheels on the bus aren't moving, we're not getting people from point A to point B. And it's critical here to do that. So what Dwight has done is to say, okay, we just had a review. The FTA said X, Y, and Z. They want us to have more staff to meet their requirements. So what's the amount of money we're going to allocate to ensure that we're meeting FTA requirements and have the proper staffing in place? What does that staffing cost, and what does that budget cost? So he took that amount, working with me, and figuring out what the FTA wanted and what those costs would be on an estimate with salary and fringe, and we came up with a budget, and that budget was the allocation that he put in that grant. Then we figured out what is the allocation for our subrecipients that they need. So we got 21 and 22 and 23 taken care of. What we're going to do for 2024 is, once the allocation has been appropriated to Tompkins County, I'm having a meeting with all the subrecipients and with the intergovernmental agencies like Cornell Cooperative Extension, Human Services Coalition. We're all going to sit at the table. We're going to see how the pot of money is, and then we're going to talk about what we each need to survive. Okay. So that's what Dwight's trying to do in this allocation. The formula is already there. We're basing it on the last, 2-3 years of what we've normally gotten every year. And then we're planning ahead so that we can show FTA. We listened to you, we heard you. Here's our staffing model that you wanted us to have. Here's how we appropriated the funds to make us stable and efficient to be able to move forward. That's on point one. On point two, with the gadabout increase in $8, has really nothing per se to do with the county because that contract needs to be RFP'd out. And it should be RFP'd out for 2024 because they just did a one-year extension. So they should RFP it out like they're supposed to do and see what the proposals are that come in based on their RFP. And then from that point on, there's a negotiation period. And then it's up to TCAT to come up with what RFP is selected and what that cost is. Their complimentary paratransit service also gets state transportation operating assistance to fund the complimentary paratransit service. And right now, everybody's in okay shape because of the hold harmless was accepted for first quarter. We'll see about second, third, or fourth, and that, if New York State DOT does not continue that practice for this year, that's where some of the tough discussions are going to have on how do we come sustainable based on New York State DOT not continuing hold harmless. Are you still confused? Is there something that I can, please ask questions away?
Deborah?
Well, I'm not confused anymore, but I'm trying to understand why, obviously, this $757,000 is not 1 year's budget.
Correct.
How many years ahead are you planning?
22, 23, and 24? 21 through 24.
Wasn't 21 and 22 already paid for?
It was not applied for, so we, let me just say it this way. It was not applied for, but we're ensuring that everything that needs to be applied for is applied for and submitted by the end of June. The reason why we won't find out till September is because the Federal Transit Administration requires us to submit all grants by the end of June, but they don't execute them, meaning they don't sign off on them till the second week of September. So once they sign off with them on the second week of September, the county is able to draw down the funds and pay the subrecipients, Gadabout and TCAT, and themselves for the transportation plan or budget for 2021, 2022, and 2023.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to, I guess I have one question. Is there any way that, I have one more question for Frank. Frank, can you tell me what happens if the funding for 21 through 23 does not get approved?
I go out and start a can drive. It's going to be approved. It's not. Okay. It's not a question of what. The money has already been appropriated for 21 through 23 to specifically Tompkins County.
Okay.
From the federal side.
Okay.
What wasn't done, that should have been done, but it wasn't done, is it wasn't put into a grant form into this transit management system that the feds require us to write in on how everything's being distributed. So we're caught up now. We just went through COVID 2020 through 2022, playing catch up. We're going to be all caught up in grants all the way up to 2023 by the end of June. And by September, the second week of September, it will be executed. I'm 100% confirmed on that because we already have appropriated the money through the FTA.
Okay, thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. Okay, Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
No.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, motion passes.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mike. Next is Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair.
Thank you very much. Government Operations has not met since our last legislature meeting, but I do have one resolution. And I'll go ahead and move Resolution M, Budget Adjustment and Contingent Fund Request, Information Technology Systems, ID 11680.
Can I have a second, please? Seconded by Susan Curry.
I'm not sure there's much to say about it. Budget adjustment, I don't know if anyone from IT is here, but there are questions.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
14 ayes, motion passes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Amanda Champion? Okay, thank you, Amanda. Next, we have Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are meeting this Thursday at 10 a.m. And a couple of things to highlight. We have a robust agenda, so we'll have to be fairly brisk. We have also a 100-page agenda packet if you haven't seen it yet, those members that are on the committee. So take some time to review it. A lot of it is presentations and environmental reviews, so it shouldn't take more than 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, so don't worry about that. No, it really shouldn't be that long. So we're having presentations from the Natural Resources Defense Council regarding Skip the Stuff, Tompkins County, and that's regarding what other municipalities are doing to reduce waste, such as when you go pick up your to-go order, napkins, utensils, things like that. We are going to consider a resolution opposing the increase of the permitted landfill height and extended life of Seneca Meadows. And we're going to have some folks here to talk to us about that. Soil and Water is going to give an update. Cooperative Extension is going to also give an update, and that's something I like to point out because often there's a lot of questions from the legislature when it comes especially to budget time, what they're up to, and I'm sure, as usual, they will have some budget requests or over-target requests, so please come to that or tune in later. We're going to have someone from the food system called the Panther Pantry from TC3 talking to us about the issues, some of the struggles that they're having. We're going to have an update from planning regarding the Caswell Solar project, so that for folks that don't recall that's on our landfill that was decommissioned, and we're looking at putting a solar project on that with the help of New York State. And we have a number of other things coming to us regarding the county's natural infrastructure capital programs, about 3 different properties being added to that. So let's see, we're also going to have a solid waste management plan draft update. And we are also going to get a summary of the issues and actions taken to date regarding the amendments to the annual recycling and materials management fee. And I know a couple legislators, Greg Mezzi and Randy Brown, have been helping work on that, as well as administration and a whole bunch of other folks. So we'll get an update on what's been done to date and talk about the next couple of steps. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Any questions for Ann Corman? Comments? Mike Lane?
Ann, you are going to be busy, aren't you? Just wondered, are we hearing anything about our trucking of our leachate at this point? I've heard another county where the DEC is not going to let them truck it anymore. I wondered if we've had any issues like that.
I haven't heard anything.
Okay, thank you.
Have you, Lisa?
I have not.
I've heard issues about trucking manure, not leachate.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. Next, Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have nothing to report.
Okay. Any questions for Dan Klein? Thank you, Dan. Next is the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee, Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met last Monday, and we began our discussion about fund balance and how to slice it and dice it and report it so that we actually know how much money we have to spend and how much money we're holding in anticipation of planned projects, et cetera. Unfortunately, we were missing Lori, who wasn't well that day. So we will pursue this again at our July meeting. And as always, you are all invited. I want to thank the non-committee members who showed up and participated at our last meeting. And I have a resolution and budget adjustment and contingent fund request, Human Services Coalition, ID 11697, and I move that.
Seconded by Lee Shurtleff.
This is a carryover from our last year's budget process where we allocated funds, put it in contingent fund for this teen coordinator position. We're now moving it to Human Services Coalition, who are overseeing the program.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Greg Mezzi?
I'm looking back at, I'm sorry I didn't return my binder, but I'll get it back. Which OTR, was that from the Human Services Coalition? Because I was just trying to look at that OTR and I didn't, was it member filed or? It was, okay.
Yeah, so if I'm recalling correctly, there was an OTR that was originally part of the HSC, which I didn't recommend as part of my budget, and then that came back as a different OTR, as an amendment. The legislature filed amendment that then took another, morphed into another program through a legislator filed amendment, if that makes any sense.
I'm more confused than the transportation.
Gosh. Okay, let me start again. So it started as a request for the food program at Southside under the HSC.
Yes.
And then that was reconsidered as a member-filed amendment. And then it then was reconsidered as support for their teen program. That was the final.
Got it, in the budget process.
In the budget process as a member-filed amendment. That was how it was finally approved.
Got it, not for the food programming.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Less confused now.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Veronica Pillar?
Just not a question, but in case it's helpful, I think as Lisa said, that OTR, just speaking as one of the two people who brought it, we came up with that after the OTR for the food program that Lisa didn't recommend was voted on and not included. So I'm sure there are lists of many OTRs out there that don't include this one that this resolution is about, but it's written down somewhere.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, roll call vote.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
14 ayes, motion passes.
Any other questions for Deborah Dawson? Thank you, Deb. Next is Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Veronica Pillar, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee has not met since our last meeting, but we will be meeting on June 28th. That's Wednesday next week from 3 to 5 p.m. The agenda is not finished yet. Will be in the next day or two, but a couple things that'll be on it are going over and approving some forms for folks to nominate people for the Strength and Diversity Award and nominate folks to be on a new round of the values posters, as well as further discussion about integration of our county values more broadly within the organization. And then while I have the floor, this is a little tangential, but the topic of the Ithaca Pride Parade had come up originally in WDIC. And so I just want to say a few of us legislators, and also joined by some Ithaca City councilors, walked in the Pride Parade on Friday evening. It was very rainy, but we showed up anyway, so I'm really thankful to Amanda and Deborah, who came out with me, as well as Annie, who provided some pride flags, and Dominic Recchio, who printed a last-minute Tompkins County branded banner, and Tammy Baker, who helped me tape it onto some cardboard on the floor of the admin office. It was a fun arts and crafts afternoon. I just think we got some good photos out of it. I think it was really great to have just the county visible presence. And the Pride event as well, just shout out to the organizers of that, who I think are not in that room that I'm not in. But it was, despite or including the rain, it was just a really joyful, inclusive experience.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Amanda and Deborah and Veronica, for representing the legislature. Any questions for Veronica Pillar? Okay. Next is Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you, Shauna. The Public Safety Committee met last week, Thursday, June 15th. We had a continuing discussion about EMS service, but we also had a presentation on Siren, which is the Safety and Incident Real-Time Emergency Notification System, which we put in place just about a year ago. And so we got an update on how is it going. We seem to be doing pretty well. Fully a quarter of the county is signed up for Siren in one capacity or another. We also have partnerships with many of the towns and villages in the city so that it's a common system. It seems to be working pretty well. In 2023, there were 144 alerts so far through the end of May. And it's running about 1/3 emergencies and 2/3 just general notifications like street closures or odd even parking, things of that nature. But Jeff Dunn gave the presentation and he said, that it has uneven pickup across upstate New York, that some municipalities really don't get very good participation. We seem to be doing a little better. I'd love to see us get up to a higher number. Some of that is that Cornell and Ithaca College have their systems, and a lot of the students just a way to get information out in a hurry, and I think it's been a good investment for the county. I just noted that he also talked about WEA, and I'm trying to remember what the acronym stands for. It's wireless EA access, maybe. But that is a system that can locate every single cell phone in the county and send a message. Regardless of if the number is from some other state, it will locate cell phones and immediately get a message out. And that's been used in, say, child abductions, Amber Alerts. So we have a robust system. I've talked about it before. I encourage anybody who's sitting there wondering, what in the world is he talking about, to go to the website, the Department of Emergency Response for the county, and look at the siren system. It's very easy to set up and use, and it gives you good information immediately when you need it. I was driving home today, and I got a siren notification saying there was a real problem with traffic on State Street between the Tuning Fork and Stewart Ave. I didn't go that way. I got home. It's that kind of information. You get it when you need it. So that was a really nice presentation. We also learned that they're doing Citizen Preparedness Corps training, and these are basic training for emergencies and disaster preparedness. There's one going on in Varna in July, and the shops at Ithaca Mall and the Village of Lansing in September. And then other than that, I wanted to report on our jail numbers. We're currently at 61 with 2 board outs. And we had a discussion about those numbers at Public Safety, and some further information came up that might be a little bit interesting to everybody here, in that we were running extraordinarily low numbers in our jail. We were down in the 20s at one point. I think we even hit the teens for a short period of time during the heart of the pandemic. But then we were up in the 30s, and we have crept up quite a bit. And we haven't had a good explanation for that. But Lance Salisbury, our assigned counsel director, indicated that we're processing a lot of warrants, that there are people who failed to show up for court, and during the pandemic, the courts were not going out and looking for these people to add to the caseloads and to potentially put people in jail during the pandemic. We are doing catch-up now, and he suggested that that's why we're running higher numbers, which says some of our prior numbers are probably artificially low because we weren't chasing warrants, but now that we're doing it, we're getting them through. Our numbers will probably come down a little bit in the near term. So I thought that was good news. I do have a resolution, and I'd put it on the floor. This is resolution O, appropriation from contingent fund, forensic pathologist testimony, ID 11673, and I would move it.
Seconded by Ann Corman.
This is to pay for expert testimony by the doctor who does the autopsies for Tompkins County. There are 2 trials coming up that potentially will require testimony. He's already testified to the grand jury, so some of this money will be used for that purpose. And if he is called to trial, that would pay the remainder of it. This is not part of the DA's budget because, fortunately, we don't regularly have murder trials that require forensic pathologist testimony.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions for Rich John? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezzi?
Yes.
Veronica Pillar?
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Travis Brooks?
Yes.
Randy Brown?
Yes.
Amanda Champion?
Yes.
Susan Curry?
Yes.
Deborah Dawson?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
Yes.
Shauna Black?
Yes.
14 ayes, motion passes.
Thank you.
There was one other item I was just going to share with the legislature, which is that the sheriff, the district attorney, and our probation department were successful in their GIVE grant application. This is the Gun-Involved Violence Elimination Grant Program, and I believe it's on the order of $380,000 or so. So it's a significant amount of money. There is a discussion going on right now on how that grant money will be applied, and there'll be more information coming soon on that. But good news.
That is good news. Thank you, Rich. Any questions for Rich John? Ann Corman?
Thanks. Not a question. I just wanted to add a little more detail on the siren. As Rich was saying, it would be great if more people could sign up for siren. And as of the date of our meeting, the municipalities signed up for this, because this is an avenue that if municipalities are signed up, then they can reach out to their residents to get more people. So far, we have, besides the county, the city of Ithaca, the villages of Dryden, Trumansburg, Cayuga Heights, Town of Ithaca, and I believe they said, Jeff said that Newfield just signed up?
I think maybe Lansing Highway Department, was it? I can't remember.
I thought Enfield had signed up.
But there
they're
certainly
not
are more municipalities that could participate, and it would be good for them, good for the county, good for the citizens.
And Jeff thought he had exhausted a lot of the things that he thought that he could do, so I brought up that maybe legislators can go, if your municipality's not on there, like mine aren't, some of mine aren't, that you could go and ask, could they think about, getting on here. So thank you.
And I just add, it does not cost any of these towns or villages anything to participate. Right. It's just a service we're providing to them.
Greg?
Then what's the holdup to getting everybody involved?
Go ask. Go ask your municipality.
I don't know. It is a really good tool for a government to have in its toolbox because it can get information out to its citizens in a very efficient, fast manner. You can send it by email, you can send it by text, it can be phone calls, the information goes when you need it to go.
As I see on your list, it's just the village of Dryden, not the town of Dryden, Ann?
Correct.
Okay, well, I would encourage the town of Dryden to sign up and use this.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you, Rich. Next is Health and Human Services Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to move Resolution P, but the one that's in your red packet.
Okay.
Resolution P, budget adjustment, contingent fund request, and authorizing the salary for position above the salary range, medical director, mental health.
I have a seconder. Deborah Dawson seconds.
So as I understand it, this is being done because this is a very in-demand position that our current salary just isn't attracting candidates for. And Lisa, I don't know if there's anything more to add beyond that.
So this position is currently redlined by the legislature for the person in the position. And despite it being redlined, it is, and that person potentially retiring, we will likely not be able, are not able to attract candidates at the current position, and the position is needed in order to maintain the operation of the mental health clinic.
Any questions or comments? Rich, John?
Redlined.
Oh, redlined meaning that the salary is, we are paying above the posted salary for the position.
Randy Brown?
Is this a mandated position that we have to have, or?
Yes, in that we are not, counties are not mandated to have a mental health clinic, but if we do operate a mental health clinic, we are mandated to have a licensed psychiatrist. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezzi?
Yes.
Veronica Pillar?
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Travis Brooks?
Yes.
Randy Brown?
Yes.
Amanda Champion?
Yes.
Susan Curry?
Yes.
Deborah Dawson?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
Yes.
Shauna Black?
Yes.
14 ayes, motion passes.
And then our next meeting is this coming Thursday, June 22nd at 2 o'clock.
Any questions or comments for Dan Klein? Okay, thanks, Dan. Next is Housing and Economic Development Committee, Greg Mezzi, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our last meeting was on June 7th. If you didn't tune in, I encourage you to all to go back and watch it. We had a conversation around housing and the different services available within the county, and really sort of starting the homelessness discussion within our committee at HED. And also had a nice introduction to our new homeless services coordinator, Tammy Baker. So that was the June 7th meeting. Our next meeting is going to be July the 5th at 3 o'clock from 3 to 5. That's the first Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
That's just to clarify, the holiday observed is the Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 4th. Oh, got it, okay. Got it. Well, we can talk about that afterwards if we need to change the meeting for some reason. I'm getting some looks from committee members. But as of right now, it's scheduled for July the 5th. I have a resolution Q, Doc ID 11643, authorization to issue a request for proposal to expand broadband access, and I will move that.
Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Randy Brown.
Great, if I may. This resolution was originally pulled, and I sent an email to all the legislators today. This was originally pulled from our agenda back in May, end of May, because we wanted to give the Tompkins County Council of Government a chance to weigh in on this resolution. And I didn't feel comfortable delaying this resolution any further unilaterally as chair, so wanted to bring it forward to the full legislature for consideration, and then ultimately, take the will of the legislature either back to the committee or move forward with this. And I know Katie Borgala and Nick are available on the screen from our planning department and can jump in at any time. But essentially what this resolution does is it addresses the 1,200 unserved parcels within our community that don't have access to broadband. And what this does is it's asking that we put out a request for proposal for a internet service provider to look at designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining a broadband network that will serve these unserved locations in the county. This was a recommendation based on a number of different options by our consultants, ECC Technologies. This did pass unanimously out of committee, but wanted to let the Tompkins County Council of Governments again weigh in. So as I sort of laid out to all of you, there's two directions that we can go because there was a desire out of the Tompkins County Council of Government meeting to look at a larger solution, which would be a municipal-owned broadband system, which we've asked our consultants to provide additional information on, and that information will be ready for the August 2nd meeting of HED, which then any action that would be taken by HED would come to the August 15th meeting or meeting of the legislature thereafter in September. So two routes that we can go. We could pass this resolution tonight and put out the RFP, which doesn't commit us to a direction or to an option, but does allow us to gather further information from any internet service providers that may be, interested in designing, building, operating to these unserved locations. While in tandem, we could still gain additional information from ECC consultants to look at a larger scope of a project that would be a large municipally owned infrastructure and broadband system. The other option we could take tonight is to refer the resolution back to HED for further discussion at its August 2nd meeting. And then either the same resolution comes back in August or a modified resolution comes back based on the decision of the committee. So that just wanted to get it all out there. Didn't feel comfortable sort of holding this resolution back any longer because the original intent to hold it back was so that TCOG could weigh in. And they sort of weighed in. If anybody has had a chance to weigh, there was sort of mixed feelings and further discussion needed. Just wanted to bring it to all of you. I will stop talking. And Katie and Nick, if there's anything that I missed, please chime in. And I would open it up for questions.
Okay. I have Deborah and Dan.
I'm just trying to understand, if we go ahead with the RFP now, that means that the RFP will proceed even as our contractor continues to work on the question of the cost of a countywide municipally owned system. Right?
Correct.
Thank you.
It's two parallel paths.
Dan Klein?
Yeah, I appreciate what you did about bringing it back to the floor. That makes sense. We should weigh in on it again. I'm going to make a motion, though, to send it back to committee, and if somebody seconds it, I'll explain my thinking.
Seconded by Travis Brooks.
Thank you. So what the TCOG did not vote, so it wasn't an official action by them, but what the feeling in that room was, by far, was that they are interested in exploring the possibility of a county-wide, municipally owned, municipally operated internet provider. And at least some of them thought that that was going to be included in this study that we've done over the past year or so. And we didn't, but now we are catching up to that. The consultant is going to be doing that for us in time for the August meeting. So I just feel like we should explore that last possibility before we take any further action. I think of it as our due diligence, explore all the options, and then proceed starting in August. So it's a few months delay, but it's not a long delay. I think it will make our municipal partners happy, and that has some importance to me. Thanks.
Okay, would anyone like to speak on sending it back to committee? Ann Corman and then Mike Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will vote against the amendment because to me it's collecting data. We're going to collect the data from the RFP to see what the interest and capability is of our providers, and then we are also going to look at what it would take or what are the options for a municipal-owned system. So to me, as long as we communicate with TCOG and let them know that, I think this will only speed up the process because we'll have that information. If it came back to me, to committee that here's the information, came back really quickly, hey, do you want to vote on this? I wouldn't vote on allocating any money until we have that other information about the possibility of the county-owned municipal system.
Mike Lane?
Yeah, I can't support Dan's motion here because I think we ought to go ahead with this. I was here 20 years ago when we looked at a county-wide municipal internet service, and it was going to be $80 million at that point. Dan or Greg, do you think it would be less now? I don't either. And I don't think it's affordable for us at the county level. I just think we ought to move this ahead, and if they want to look at, county-wide one and what it would cost, fine. But why delay this for 1,200 people that need some service?
Thank you, Mike. Greg?
Yeah, so again, just to clarify that this isn't creating the solution, this is just asking for the proposal from internet service providers, what interest, what costs, what challenges may exist to potentially bring service to these 1,200 unserved locations. So that's all that this is saying right now. This is not committing to a solution. And Katie, correct me if I'm misstating that, please. But I think that's an important distinction, that this is just asking for additional information to have as part of the decision-making process. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. And I wanted to ask Katie and or Nick if there's any logistical or staff challenges that this would create if we were to run parallel routes with this going forward to RFP, while at the same time ECC is looking at what sort of we've been calling option 5, this longer, more expansive municipally owned system.
Yeah, to that question, I haven't heard any indication from ECC that would be an issue to do both, drafting the RFP and continuing exploration of this municipal broadband option. Seems like they're capable of doing both simultaneously.
And I would just add, Greg, that just to temper expectations, ECC is not going to do a full business plan for a county municipally owned broadband. It's going to be a comparable high-level analysis to the other options.
Okay, any other comments to move this back to committee? Rich John?
Yeah, I'm going to support the amendment, but for a different reason. I'm looking at line 17 of the resolution where it says the county intends to provide financial or in-kind support. Maybe I missed it, but I don't think we made that decision. I know we had discussion about this quite a while ago, and we did agree to go forward with looking at this, and I think it was at your committee, Dan, and I raised the question then, what is this going to cost? And this is a new service. This is not an area the county has been involved with, and that we should step in carefully. I'm not saying I'm opposed to the county participating in broadband, but we don't have a number, and we're saying we're going to do this. We are going to spend money on this. I would be much more comfortable with language indicating we're considering providing financial or in-kind support. But this says we're going to do it, and I don't know what we're committing to. So I'd like to see it go back to committee for us to make sure we address that question as well.
I agree with Rich John, and so I will also send it back, vote to send it back to committee. Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Rich for bringing that point up because that's significant. So I think I will be supporting Dan's motion to send it back to committee.
Okay, I have Dan Klein, Mike Lane, Greg Muzzy.
So I'm kind of arguing against my own amendment. I probably shouldn't say anything, but a few things I will mention is that the county has provided money and other support for broadband in the past. The original broadband study that was done, project that was finished about 10 years ago, the legislature spent about 2 years working on that. And then more recently, about a year and a half ago, I think we spent $75,000. We gave it to the town of Newfield for them to implement broadband to 180 new houses. And then the price that you mentioned, the price tag, the option 1 price tag, which is what was in the resolution, is $7 million. Just so you know, just so you have a number in mind. And there are an awful lot of grants out there, both federal and state. And so I think everybody's hoping that a lot of this will come from grants, but we don't know that yet. And then one more thing I can mention is that I would imagine a service that the county, that we probably will all be comfortable with the county providing would be some grant writing assistance.
Thank you, Dan. Mike, Greg, and Mike Sigler.
We don't have to send this back to committee to adjust that language to change that Rich is suggesting. We can simply do it before we adopt it.
Greg Muzzy.
Katie or Nick, to Rich's point, there was an estimated county share essentially, or local share in that $7 million price tag. Am I remembering the presentation correctly?
I think you're remembering just me trying to do some back of the envelope calculations.
Maybe
because
that's what it was.
It assumes that there would be some share by internet service provider, that they would pay something, the county would pay something, and what the county would be asked to pay, we would go for a grant to try to get funding. Almost all, I think all the grants have at least a 25% local contribution, cash contribution. So I think my figure was somewhere around $1 million for the county to have all unserved addresses served. But that's a rough guess.
And without the internet service providers responding to an RFP, we really don't know how much the local share would be, because we wouldn't know what the internet service providers would be willing to commit to in terms of their contribution to a project or solution.
That's correct.
So it's like, do we want the horse or the cart, or the chicken or the egg? Or like, we can't have the number without the RFP, but I understand Rich's concern with the committal language in the resolution.
Mike Sigler?
I was just going to say I agree with Mike Lane. I mean, this sounds like just a word change, frankly. But to be honest, we're already spending money on it. I mean, Nick, you get paid, right? Like, you get a paycheck, and you're working on it. So it's spending money on it. Not to be glib, but I mean, the key word in there was or. financial or in kind. But yeah, I mean, that's a single word. I don't think we have to actually send this all the way back to committee.
Okay, so we're going to vote.
Send it back.
Yeah. Can I? Okay, we have a motion right now to send it back to the, is that the, what committee is it?
HED.
Housing and Economic Development Committee. We ready to vote? Any other comments? Okay. Roll call vote.
Mike Lane?
No.
Greg Mezzi?
No.
Veronica Pillar?
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
No.
Travis Brooks?
No.
Randy Brown?
No.
Amanda Champion?
Yes.
Susan Curry?
No.
Deborah Dawson?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
No.
Shauna Black?
No.
I have 6 ayes and 8 noes. Motion fails.
Okay, so the main resolution's on the floor. Rich John?
I would move to amend line 17 to say, whereas the county is considering providing financial or in-kind support to the selected providers too.
That's friendly?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or conversation?
Randy was the second.
Randy Brown? Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezzi?
Yes.
Veronica Pillar?
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Travis Brooks?
Yes.
Randy Brown?
Yes.
Amanda Champion?
Yes.
Susan Curry?
Yes.
Deborah Dawson?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
Dan Klein?
Yes.
Ann Corman?
Yes.
Shauna Black?
Yes.
14 ayes. Motion passes.
This conversation will continue in HED, so if it's something you're interested in, please, take part in those discussions when they happen. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Rich John?
I was just hoping Greg was going to say what he just said. If we're thinking about spending $1 million in this budget year, that's a lift. I certainly want people to have internet access, but that's going to be a hard decision.
Any other questions or comments for Greg? Thank you, Greg. Next, we have an individual member-filed resolution, and I will turn it over to Legislator Brown or Legislator Sigler.
Yes, thank you. I have a resolution regarding the change in the election year for county legislatures and other things, and I have a question for Amanda on how the process should work. So should I have, there's an amendment that I'm going to agree to that was submitted by Deborah and Dan. Should I have removed my resolution before? Okay, I just wasn't sure how.
Yeah, no, you go ahead and move your resolution, and then Deborah or Dan will move a substitution.
As an amendment,
As an
and then
amendment.
if
Okay.
it's friendly, you will say it's friendly, and then we will go with the
Okay, I
amended
just
one.
wasn't sure, so I wanted to ask. So I'm moving that we, resolution urging Governor Hochul to veto pending legislation impacting the local elections.
Okay, can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Mike Sigler. Deborah?
And then I would offer the resolution, the substitute resolution urging Governor Hochul to veto pending legislation S3505B and A4282B that would impact the timing of local elections as an amendment to the member filed.
Seconded by Dan Klein. Okay, so the amended resolution is on the floor.
It's that friendly?
It is.
Yes, it's friendly. I like the way you worded it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Amanda Champion?
Well, I think you should ask if anyone objects.
Does anyone object to the amended resolution on the floor?
The friendliness of it.
Very friendly. Okay, any comments or questions on this resolution? Mike Lane.
I'm absolutely opposed to this. I cannot believe that we would ask the governor to veto legislation which has the purpose of increasing voter participation in elections. And that's exactly what you're doing with this resolution. There's probably no more sacred right than the right to vote. But we know that there are many elections when voters don't turn out. And off-year elections is probably one of the biggest situations in which people don't turn out. There are other elections, school board elections, special district elections, even village elections, but this doesn't affect them. We're only talking about town board elections and county legislature elections with this kind of laws that have been passed by the New York State Senate and the New York State Assembly. It's on the governor's desk. You're saying, oh, veto this, veto this. Doesn't matter if more people don't vote because more people do vote on the even years. We ought to have done this at our own legislature a couple of years ago when we had the opportunity. All across this country, we've been watching efforts to restrict or repress voter participation. It's not as open as it used to be back when we had Jim Crow laws, for example. But it's still out there, reducing the number of voting places. And I'm not talking about New York at this point. Making it more difficult for people to vote. Voter ID is another one, making it more difficult for people to vote. We should be opposed to those kinds of things. We should be doing everything we can to make it easier for people to vote. That's why we supported things like early voting. And many of us support the idea of having no excuse absentee voting or mail-in voting. This is a good thing that the New York State Legislature has done. You folks are off track with this. You really are off track with this because you're saying, oh, it's all right if not a lot of people vote at the county and the village and county and the town board elections. I am just totally surprised by this. And you certainly don't have my vote.
Thank you, Mike. Lisa Shurtleff.
I'll stay away from the political angles on this thing. I'm just going to talk about the practicality of it. And I think it's counterproductive. I disagree with Mike respectfully. Can you imagine a ballot coming out, going in, I'm just etching it right here, the effect or potential effect of this legislation? You take a governor's year in 2026, and you have a governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, comptroller, potentially a U.S. senator. It'll flip that way. Sometimes it won't. House, Senate, Assembly, potentially 3 state Supreme Court candidates, 1, 2, 3, a county judge, a state senator. I already hit that. I'm sorry. Sheriff, county clerk, county legislator, town supervisor, town clerk, highway superintendent, 2 or 3 town council people, 1 or 2 town justices, and any vacancies that come along the line, and you ask the voters to go in and pay attention to upwards of 30 contests, then with some villages in upstate New York that do their elections in November, add a mayor and a couple of trustees and a village justice. I go into a ballot on one of these years, and as a former election commissioner, and I've forgotten to flip it over and look at the propositions, which, oh, by the way, we might add 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of those. Granted, you'll have larger turnout for the local elections based on there being the presidential or statewide elections. But for those of us that study the results year in and year out, you may start out with a huge number of people, almost 100% voting for presidents and governors. You get to the end of the ballot, and the number of blank ballots that are in the thousands many times. So granted, there's more people going in, but you've also got people that just plain don't want to go down through the whole thing. Now, let me tell you another thing. Almost every one of us here, I think, goes out and passes petitions. Can you understand, and this is maybe a selfish thing, the first week of March in a blizzard trying to go to 20 doors and asking those that haven't gone south to sign 20 pieces of paper or more? I have visions of getting hit side the head with a snow shovel. But I think you overwhelm the voters, you overload them. It's not a thoughtful process for many people. I think it's counterproductive. I support the amended resolution.
Thank you, Lee. Randy Brown and Deb Dawson.
Yes. The reason I brought this forward is because first of all, these legislative actions were done pretty late in the session. And as I read the one in the Senate, I was confused by it. It almost looks like, as a legislature, I would have to run in 25 and 26. I'm a little confused by this. So 2 years in a row, yep. I would have to do that. So I'm a little confused by that.
That's not correct.
That's the case. So but I was unclear on it. So I just think it was late in the game. But I think that local elections are more important than presidential elections. I just think they are because a president or a vice president or even our senators aren't going to really have the connections to the community that local electors, people who run are. And I just can't imagine all the signs that would be out there and the confusion and I just think it's a distraction from the local elections, which is why I brought this forward. So thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Deb Dawson?
Yeah, and further to that, our election commissioners pointed out to us the very different kinds of services that they provide to the public in these different election years. In an even year with the presidential, senatorial, state and federal elections, when people are super energized, admittedly, they are more likely to have voter registration drives. They are more likely to have questions about absentee ballots. And most of the work that our boards of elections do in those years is directed to helping voters with those tasks. In the odd years, you've got people running for local offices. Many of them are not politicians. They've never run before. They need help with ballot access. They and their committees and their campaigns need help understanding their financial reporting obligations, et cetera. We've all been through this. So the work is divided up. On the even years, it's voter-driven. On the odd years, it's candidate and committee-driven, and it keeps our boards of election busy on a fairly even level. And they provide important services that make our elections work. If we lump all of that in 1 year, there are going to be years when they're busier than a one-armed paper hanger, and then years when they're kind of, eating bonbons. And the years when they're busier than a one-armed paper hanger are years when they're not going to be giving their best service to voters and candidates. So that's one of my concerns. To equate this with voter suppression is just spurious. Nobody's suppressing the vote. If people choose not to exercise their right to vote, that's their choice. I'm not imposing some limitation on their right to vote. I'm done.
Okay, and I would just remind everyone that this is a resolution urging Governor Hochul. And we have these resolutions every once in a while, and they come along, and we can debate these for 3-4 hours. Or we could just assume that this is probably going to go in the recycling bin. So,
well, thanks for that, Shauna.
Okay, okay, Mike Lane?
I just can't let her comment that my discussion saying that this is voter suppression is spurious. It's not spurious. It's about America and about the right to vote. And for you to say it's spurious because it's a little more difficult for our boards of election. We could hire more people. We do that during presidential years. We could make this work. Maybe we need an extra piece of paper and maybe you have 2 pieces of paper for the ballot. There are lots of ways to make these things work. I think our boards of election could figure that out. Spurious, nonsense.
Would anyone like to offer a definition of spurious?
No, but it's a great word.
Greg Muzzy.
Yes, since I have it open actually on my computer because I also was of the Texas Board of Education.
Yes.
No, I grew up in Ohio. Much better education system. Spurious, not being what it purports to be, false or fake?
Fake news. Okay. Would anyone else like to comment? Greg Muzzy and then Rich John.
So does anybody have the history of why this came to be? We had a lot of historical context and things thrown out about voter suppression. I'm just curious what the historical context or rationale was when someone put this current system into place or practice. I think as we honor our history and look to learn from it, why was this decision made previously? Was it for voter suppression? Was it for greater access to local candidates? Was it to support Board of Elections operations? Does anybody have the historical context on that, or just the awful things that our country has done to suppress voters, which I don't know if this is necessarily one of those things?
Sounds like your next research project right there.
Rich John and then Mike Lane.
I'm going to support the resolution. Mike, I understand what you're saying, and I think we do have issues in this country with people not voting. And certainly we have that here in our community. My district in particular, with the high student population, I have gone door to door up through College Town trying to find the registered voters, and they just care about the presidential election. They don't follow local politics at all, and you really wouldn't expect them to. But I think the points Lee raised really resonate, that even if you get more people coming into the polls, you're really going to have undervotes on the local races that people just still won't pay attention, even if it's right in front of them. I'd love to hear ideas about how we could do better in our odd year elections to get the word out that it does really matter. I mean, our budget is, $200 million of taxpayer money is all in there. People should care, and each town and village in the city are spending, large amounts of money. We should be watched, and people should be careful who they give that authority to. I don't have a good answer to that, but I'm not sure putting our local elections into the even years is going to make a big difference with people actually paying attention to the local election. So I'll support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
On to Greg.
Mike Lane.
Hey, Greg, this wasn't just brought up this year. It was brought up last year. In fact, NISAC did a survey about it last year.
Veronica Pillar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also support the resolution. And Mike, I agree with you that voter turnout is important, and voter suppression is terrible, and we should be doing all we can to increase participation in elections. But I think that argument being used for this state level legislation would have a lot more weight with me if it were moving just all elections to even years. But it's not. That's one objection. So it still leaves like off-year elections being even smaller. I also think, I mean, seconding all the points Lee raised about the long ballot, the ballot drop-off, I looked this up. It seems like people who study this say that turnout is still higher even with people not filling out the end of a ballot if local elections are moved, or they're looking at mayoral elections, if mayoral elections are moved to even years versus odd. But I think the overshadowing of local races, both in the media and among like the people doing the petitioning and the campaigning and all that stuff being stretched more thin, is very real, and it is a problem for getting folks more engaged. Things I would be excited about that, unlike this bill, would maybe more remove a barrier from people voting are making Election Day a holiday, which we probably don't have the power to do, implementing ranked choice voting, which has been shown to engage more people who are like disillusioned with the two-party system, which we could do. I have no idea how our commissioners would feel about that. And I had another thought that's escaped me. So that's all. So, but I think that, yeah, like increasing voter participation is important, but this doesn't seem to do it in a meaningful way that's worth the costs. I remembered my other thought. Encouraging civic engagement with kids when they're young. My 12th grade government teacher told us repeatedly that he would haunt us if we did not vote. And obviously now I'm engaged in local politics, but for a long time that was driving me showing up to every little election.
Thank you. Travis Brooks.
To me, this should be a kind of a data-driven decision. Does the data show, Veronica shared a little bit, but does the data show that either way draws more people to vote and all the way down the ballot? Because for me, that's what's most important, is what the data says, not what anybody in this room thinks, not what anybody's opinion is, but what the data says. I think sometimes we make decisions based on what we think, what we know, what we do, what our friends do, what people talk about in a group. But what does the data really show? Is this a data-driven decision from the Senate, from the mayor, from us? And to me, I really would like to see what the data says. And I know we're just responding. We're not creating here. But to me, it's all about the data in this situation.
Thank you, Travis. Anyone else for comment? Ann Corman?
Yeah, I'm just going to say too, regarding the data, I do trust the people that have signed on to this legislation, and that I didn't have time to go look at their data, but there are people that I trust. So I'm going to vote against this because I don't feel that I've had, and I haven't heard anybody here say that we've looked at the data. I know that the reason for this legislation is to increase voter turnout. And I am for that, so I will vote against this because that's what I see as, that's what I know is the intention of this.
Thank you, Ann. Travis Brooks?
So just so I'm clear, this is opposing something. So what's being presented from what I'm hearing, Annie, is your feeling is that what we're voting against was designed to lower turnout?
The bills are the purpose is to increase voter turnout.
Right.
So I'm not going to vote for a resolution that's against something that is intended to increase voter turnout. But it would be great if we had more time to look at it or, talk to our state reps, but I just haven't had the time. But I know that's the intent. It's been talked about other years. It's been talked about a few months ago. So in those conversations, I know that was the intent in talking with some of our state representatives.
So I'll just take a turn here. So I actually reached out to Anna Callis yesterday, and The thought behind, and I believe there's a long list of Democrats that have supported this, including Leah Webb, our state senator. And the thought is that there would be greater voter turnout on their end. And so that's why many of the Democrats, because I'm trusting that despite the fact that I have not collected data, that they've looked at that as well. So thank you, Ann. Travis, did you have your hand up again? Okay. Am I missing anyone? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Mike Lane.
No.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Ziegler.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
No.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
No.
Shauna Black.
No.
10 ayes, 4 noes, motion passes.
Okay. And we are at the end of our meeting. We do have some minutes from our previous meeting, June 6, 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Rich John, seconded by Greg Mezzi. Any corrections or comments? Questions? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Ziegler.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Randy Brown.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
14 ayes. Motion passes.
Rich John?
Just if I could take a moment to update the legislature on some actions taken by the Industrial Development Agency, which met on Wednesday, June 14th. One significant item taken by the Development Corporation, which is the parallel entity to the IDA that deals with not-for-profits and community organizations. We agreed to provide funding for a community kitchen project to allow startups and food producers to use a full-scale commercial kitchen. It's contingent upon several other steps, but I thought this was a pretty exciting project for the Development Corporation to support. The IDA received an application for a new building project on the corner of Buffalo Street and Meadow Street entitled The Citizen. This is where the Joe's Restaurant is located. It's an 80-unit apartment building with designed for right around 100 to 120% median income. There will be a public hearing on July 11th at 11 o'clock at the IAED offices on Seneca Street. And then I just would also mention on our consent agenda today, we passed a resolution for some housing projects. And this is through the Community Housing Development Fund. The IDA provided $230,000 of support to those projects. And for those who are watching at home, the Community Housing Development Fund is a collaboration where the IDA provides funding, the county, the city, and I believe Cornell participates. It's doing really good things, and there's some momentum behind the funding for it. We're going to see more projects, but I was very happy to see that resolution come through our agenda today. Happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for Rich John? Okay. Mike Lane?
Rich, are you hearing anything about people objecting to tearing down Joe's historic restaurant?
I did have a couple of people just say that's a shame. That restaurant has been a real community fixture for a very long time. It's also been closed for quite a while, and it's a non-productive property. But I went there as a child. So yeah, Joe's means something. It's a shame to see.
Gosh, another red house.
Good. Good salad and breadsticks. Okay, I have Mike Ziegler, Deb Dawson, and Lee Shirtliff.
So
When's that public hearing again? I'm sorry.
July 11th at 11 o'clock at the IAED offices.
And to Lee's point, it is, what color is the bill? Now?
It's red.
Still red.
It is red. It's in the shape of a
house.
There.
Red house, yeah.
That's good point, Mike and Lee. Thank you.
It started as a house, I think in the 20s or 30s, and it has just been, anybody who's been around here has been to Joe's many, many times.
Deborah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that some of those houses are going to be built right across the street from me on Dart Drive, and my husband and I are looking forward to welcoming our new neighbors.
Lee Shurtleff? Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Travis Brooks, seconded by Greg Muzzy. All those in favor? Thank you all. Have a good night.